Some new targets have been revealed for the Toronto Blue Jays, and they're very encouraging. We know that they need some help on the offensive side of things, and we know that they're all in on Juan Soto, but the Blue Jays have some backup plans here, and they're not too shabby, if I say so myself. So I'll break them down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. Welcome in, everybody, to Jays Digest. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, starting to heat up again on multiple fronts, whether it's the Juan Soto front, whether it's anybody else that the Blue Jays are targeting. They're in on a lot of players at this current moment in time. But before we break that all down, I want to let you know that a large percentage of you watching these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So go ahead and hit that sub button because the support has been unbelievable on these recent videos. And Nick, we're very close to our goal of 15,000 subscribers, and I think we can get there by the end of this Juan Soto fiasco that we got going on. So shout out to you guys for all the support. Don't stop it right there. Keep it going. But Nick, let's talk some new targets here. Let's give the Juan Soto stuff a bit of a break because we've been beating that and there's no new information to report to you guys. So we're not coming out here with false things. We're just reporting back on what we hear on a daily basis, and we're going to try to do our best to sift through all of it. But Nick, these are a couple of very intriguing targets that the Blue Jays are linked to right here that could help solve some issues. I don't think it's their biggest issue going into 2025, but still, it doesn't hurt to have as many arms as possible.
Yeah, Juan Soto is meeting with the Yankees today, but on the Blue Jays front, it's pretty quiet as of now. But again, we mentioned yesterday we showed it briefly, the Ben Nicholson Smith article, but we're gonna dive into it fully here. And Peter, basically, again, a part of Ben Nicholson Smith's most recent reports is that the GM meetings became clear that the Jays were motivated in the starting pitching market. And just so it came out that the Jays are actively showing interest in the likes of Fried, Severino, and Yusei Kikuchi, as well as 23-year-old phenom Roki Sasaki, who we've made a video on in the past, and we'll probably make another video on him as his decision ears closer, because of course he is going to be getting posted. But this is interesting. I want to focus on Severino for a little bit before we get into some of the other guys as well, because there's been Ben Nicholson Smith earlier on in the offseason also linked the Jays to, of course, Severino very early on. And then, of course, this was the most recent article, which dropped just a couple of days ago about, of course, specifically mentioning Severino. So before we get into some of the other targets, some of the other reports, what are your thoughts on this report that the Jays are actively looking at Luis Severino? And I believe there was another reporter who also said the same thing. I don't know, maybe even John Heyman. It's they're clearly interested in the starting pitching market. They're very aggressive in that front from all reports. And it seems like whether or not they get a guy like Soto or even Alex Bregman, a big hitter, they're going to go for a high-end starting pitcher as well. I'm not considering Luis Severino super high-end, although we'll get into his stats here in a minute. He did have a phenomenal year last season with the Mets.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider him a high-end guy either, but I don't think the Blue Jays need a high-end pitcher per se. I get it. I mean, the rotation did struggle at times last year, but if we take a look at the team as a whole, I don't think the rotation was anywhere close to one of their biggest weaknesses. You know that you're going to have Kevin Gausman going into next season, Chris Bassett, José Berríos, probably Bowden Francis as well for the way that he finished off the year. And then there's a bit of a question mark in that fifth starter spot. Is it going to be filled internally? Is it going to be filled externally? And if we take a look at all the external options of those names that you listed right there, I think Yusei Kikuchi and Luis Severino are probably the most realistic. I don't think you need a multi-year guy in that fifth starter spot. You have Jake Bloss, who's in your minor league system. You do have some prospects that, although they're not healthy right now, are figuring to be options down the line for you. So I think working with more so of a stopgap guy from year to year on a year to year basis, that is probably the best play right now for the Blue Jays. And Luis Severino has dealt with some injuries in the past. His stuff has declined from his time with the Yankees, but he ate a lot of innings last year, and he seems to be trending in the right direction. So even though he has dealt with injuries and he has shown some flashes of inconsistency in the past, I like that name, and I think he would do a lot of wonders for the Toronto Blue Jays, especially in that fifth starter spot where right now, as currently constructed, they have a hole.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans thought when they heard Luis Severino, they thought that he wasn't very good at all. And again, in 2023 with the Yankees, when we last saw him, of course, in the AL East playing the Blue Jays a lot, he wasn't very good. It's above a 6 ERA coming off of course, some up and down years. But last season, You can see here 3.91 ERA. He pitched over 180 innings. Like, he was one of the big reasons the Mets made the playoffs. He helped shore up
Yeah.
their rotation, and he's only 30 years old, so it makes a lot of sense for the Jays if they're going to go out and not spend huge. Fried's going to get a multi-year deal worth a lot. Roki Sasaki, a ton as well. And you also figure Kikuchi, to a degree, is going to get a few years and get a lot of money as well, especially with how good he pitched on the Astros. Not quite as much as the other two, but Severino, I'm not exactly sure how much he's going to get in the open market. Now, whether it's a 2-year deal, maybe something like that would be good. It depends on what the market's looking like, but he's a very good pitcher. And again, he's been linked constantly to the Toronto Blue Jays, and it would fit in well with that rotation. But you think about the starting rotation after this year. After next season, it's going to get a little bit interesting because they do need some more people then, because obviously Kevin Gausman's going to be, in theory, gone. Chris Bassett's gone. Depending if they extend either of them, it's an aging rotation now at this point. So bringing in some, it kind of depends though. If they go out and get Juan Soto, then getting, Max Fried or one of the bigger guys makes a bit more sense because they need to go all in for the next couple of years while they have this great starting pitching staff. But depending on what happens there, the pitching staff's not getting any younger at all.
No, they're not. But one thing that you can rely on with this pitching staff is that they're durable and that they eat a lot of innings. Chris Bassett, he gets you 180 to 200 innings in his sleep. Like that, that's how consistent he is. And maybe his stuff doesn't stand out at you. Maybe he's not the most exciting pitcher, but that's the exact kind of guy that you need in the middle of your rotation. Someone you can rely on every fifth day to go out there and get you 6 to 7 innings, giving up 3 runs. That's what Chris Bassett does. He's a quality start machine. Same thing for José Berríos. Same thing for Kevin Gausman, who maybe doesn't have the elite stuff that he had a couple of years ago. The strikeouts are starting to trend in the wrong direction, but he's still someone that I trust at the top of that rotation because he's been there before. He's got experience. And like I mentioned, he eats a lot of innings. So the Jays have a lot of innings covered already with those 3 guys. Now, the question mark is, what are you going to get from Bowden Francis? He was great towards the end of last season, and he showed some flashes of brilliance in his rookie year as well. But can he piece that together over the course of 162? He was the best pitcher in Major League Baseball for a month and a half for that season. He was fantastic. I'm not expecting him to go out there and have a sub 2 ERA over the course of a full season, but can he be in the high threes, the low fours, and give you a lot of length? That's what I'm wondering. That's something that he's yet to prove at the big league level over the course of an entire season. So that's a question mark, and the 5th starter spot is a question mark as well. But as for the contract that Severino would receive, I think last year did him a lot of favors in terms of negotiating tactics. I don't know if it's going to be a long-term deal, like a 4 or 5 year deal, but he is only 30. And despite his injury history, he showed some durability last season and was a big part of why the Mets made it all the way to the NLCS. He was their ace when their pitcher there, the Japanese guy, his name is evading me
Kodai
here.
Senga.
Kodai Senga, exactly. He was covering for Kodai Senga, who was out for most of the year, who only came back in the playoffs. So that was a big loss for them, and Severino covered for him every step of the way. So he's got that in him. We know the stuff is there, and I think a 2 or 3 year deal gets it done. He wants that bit of security, but I'm sure he also wants to test the free agent market again if he puts together another couple solid seasons.
Yeah, he also has a ton of upside. I mean, he has electric stuff. He still is only
Yeah.
30. I mean, it seems like he's been in the league forever now, but again, it's definitely an interesting name. And quickly touching on some bullpen things as well. And again, Max Fried and Yusei Kikuchi are also very intriguing names, and we'll continue to update you guys with that. And I think if they strike out, just a note on Soto, I think they might pivot a little bit harder to Max Fried, but we'll see how it goes with that. But Peter, I want to ask you about this, and we haven't talked about this much here this offseason on the channel. The bullpen help, and there's been some rumblings of the Jays non-tendering Jordan Romano. They have of course, Eric Swanson, Dylan Tate, someone that they picked up off of waivers towards the end of last season when a lot of Jays fans were kind of checked out from the team, and he looked solid in his brief time with the Jays. You have guys like Zach Pop. There are 4 more relievers whose projected arbitration salaries make them potential non-tender candidates. The Blue Jays see potential in all 4 and would presumably be happy to welcome them to spring training. Question is, at what cost? And I know to a lot of fans out there, like the idea of non-tendering Jordan Romano is a little bit crazy, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Obviously, their bullpen needs a lot of work. I think they keep Eric Swanson, and they also probably keep Dylan Tate, but at $7.75 million, there's a real case to be made that the Jays aren't going to keep Jordan Romano on the team heading into next season, which is a crazy thing to think about, but it's something that, according to all reports, they're definitely considering.
I just don't think that's something that you can do. And you can say whatever you want about Jordan Romano, but the truth is, if you look at the stats, he's been one of the more reliable bullpen arms in Major League Baseball for a fairly long time now. And whether you think he's a closer, whether you think he's an eighth inning guy, he is crucial to what the Blue Jays are hoping to accomplish next season. And you already have significant holes that need to be filled in that bullpen. Creating another one, especially in high leverage situations, I just don't know if that's smart. You already lost Jimmy Garcia at the trade deadline. You're in danger of losing Eric Swanson as well, and you parted ways with Genesis Cabrera, who bailed the Blue Jays out quite a few times last year, even though the numbers weren't amazing and the strikeout stuff isn't where you want it to be with a guy that throws in the high 90s. He was still one of the more reliable arms in that bullpen for the Blue Jays. So I don't think that's something you could afford to do personally. And Nick, I don't know what you think about it. Just the thought of letting Jordan Romano go, and sure, I'd like to see him develop a third pitch. I'd like to see him be a little bit more at ease in those pressure situations and be able to be more versatile, come in and get you 4 outs as opposed to just be a one inning guy. But he's crucial to the Blue Jays bullpen, and he is a big part of that unit right there. Getting rid of him just doesn't make sense to me. And I understand the money aspect of it. I get it's a business, but then you're digging yourself into an even deeper hole if you're the Blue Jays front office if you don't get this thing done.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they should, and I honestly don't think they really will. However,
No.
if they do, they definitely need to have a contingency plan, and whether that's signing or trading for one of the best relief, like you have a huge hole to fill if they let him go. And again, if you're the front office and you want to save that 7.75 million, you better have a contingency plan as to why you're doing that rather than keeping him, especially when, again, he's dealt with injuries. He wasn't good last year, but neither was Bichette. You're not going to go out and obviously different
No.
level of players, but you got to ride with him because, again, I think this offseason is tainted a little bit, or heading into it is because of how bad the season was last year for a lot of, the players. Eric Swanson was bad. Jordan Romano was bad. Bichette, like a lot of things happened. And in a season that was supposed to be a bounce back year, they let it go. But let us know down below what your
Yeah.
thoughts are on this. Any final thoughts, Peter? It kind of just reminds us all of how wild last regular season was, and how bad it literally everything went wrong. Luckily, they have a whole offseason now to completely change the course for fans, and that's why I think
Yeah.
they're more in on Juan Soto than I initially believed.
Yeah, nothing went right for them last year. And you could argue that everything kind of went right for them the year before in terms of health and keeping everybody on the field. You look at that rotation, no one really missed any time. And apart from Alek Manoah's struggles in 2022, I mean, nothing was really out of the ordinary there in 2023, sorry. Like everything kind of bounced in the right direction for the Toronto Blue Jays health-wise, whereas last year Bo was on the injured list 3 separate times. You had a carousel of shortstops, a carousel of third basemen. Nothing went right for the team last year, which is why when I look at the bullpen, you have to be in the mindset of add, not subtract. You cannot subtract from an already depleted bullpen unit. So I look at the top arms out there, and you could even argue that that's an even more crucial get than a specific bat that is on the market, like Blake Trinan or someone like that, someone of that nature that can be a shutdown guy for you at the end of a ball game. That is what the Blue Jays need, and they're in no position right now to get rid of one of those guys who has been very consistent in that regard over the course of the past few years.
Yeah, I agree, and ultimately, there's a whole offseason ahead of us, but realistically, a lot of the moves are going to go down now as winter meetings approach in 3 or so weeks. We'll keep you updated with all that, so make sure to hit the subscribe button. We'll see you guys soon.